Season 2 is finally among us, guys.
What is being married like?
Yeah, we've been married for 1.5 years now. I'm pregnant. Thanks, fiance.
And I'm excited for this new adventure of Season 2. Let's go.
Yay.
Ladies, good to be back with you.
Mm-hmm.
So last episode, we touched on mental illness. And now we'd just like to talk about chronic illness, which I think all kind of ties. I'm going to be really honest with you guys. I never struggled with chronic illness. I know family, friends that do. And I know some of you, as my friends, struggle with chronic illness. And so I just want to ask you guys, Naomi, you can tell me, honestly, I don't know what your chronic illness is, but just tell me a bit about your struggle with that.
Yeah, so I have something called EDS or Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. I still don't know if I pronounce it correctly, honestly.
Couldn't even help you.
Which I found out I was diagnosed officially with when I was probably 20. So I went quite a long time not knowing that I had it.
Wow.
And it's, I'm really bad with like the medical terms and all of that, but essentially it impacts all of your soft tissue.
Wow.
So it's also often people will kind of take the one part of hypermobility. So that's also connected within it. And so initially where I thought it was just a thing of that my ligaments were more flexible than they should be and therefore didn't support kind of my joints. And I had more pain and more likelihood of kind of like disjointed. Dislocation, that's the word. I then over time kind of going back and talking to rheumatologists and stuff like that have learned that it impacts a lot more than just joints. So it impacts eyes, there's fatigue, headaches, vocal cord stuff, even your heart.
When you say fatigue, does that so you don't sleep well?
Yeah.
Because of the pain.
Yeah. So it's this weird one where it's like, I like absolutely need a minimum of 9 hours of sleep every night. Because it's almost this thing where it's not that I can't sleep. Yeah. I have pain in my body. So particularly for me, it's kind of pain in a lot of my joints. So it would be chronic pain in my hands. So my hands are always in pain.
Yeah.
Very commonly my knees, my back, sometimes shoulders, wrists are a very constant one. But it basically is just this thing of that can mean that it is hard for me to go to to fall asleep, but it's not often the case that I'm waking up in the night. The biggest thing is I will go through a whole night of sleep and dream a lot and feel like I kind of my conscience is in and out throughout the night. Yeah. And I'll wake up feeling exhausted. Yeah. So I had one time recently where I woke up and I remember it was this one day I woke up and I was like, wow, I feel like I slept last night. Yes. Because for me, the normal is that when I wake up, I actually don't necessarily feel like I have any more energy than I did when I went to bed. Yeah. It's just, I know in my mind, obviously, that it's good that I've slept. But I'm kind of waking up the same that I felt the night before.
Interesting. Wow. Yeah. So I just want to ask you, since we're on this topic, so you're married, as we mentioned earlier. So I'm sure with your chronic pains, and your husband, he's very an active man, wants to do a lot of things. Does that kind of, I don't know, put a damper on whatever he wants to do? Because, well, not damper, I don't want to say damper, but does that make you not be able to do certain things because of your chronic pain?
Yeah. So a lot of it is kind of, and this is a whole thing that I would love to talk about in general, because I was even saying to my husband literally yesterday, to Connor, I was like, I would love if there was somewhere that I could hear other people sharing about kind of chronic illness and particularly chronic pain, and talking and understanding more fully how they manage it and kind of even just the balance of where to push past things, and just to deal with the fact that you're experiencing pain and where actually you need to pull back from things to kind of avoid continual irritation or whatever.
Yeah, right.
Because I personally don't think that it's talked about. I think probably from a medical perspective, you do get a lot of information. Yeah. But I think especially when you bring kind of faith in the mix of it and stuff like that, there's a lot of areas that I feel aren't touched on. Yeah. And I just wouldn't know where to find that. Yeah. But yeah, for me and Connor, it does impact, because even just things for me, it it kind of just, when I talk about it, it's like I feel like I'm an old woman. I have like an old woman's body, you know? So I'm like, when it comes to like picking up like even like a jug of water, like I need to like support the base of the jug, because if I'm just holding it with my wrist, it feels like really bad pain, and also it feels like I could like lose control of it kind of because of the weakness of my wrists. Things like walking, it's like there's kind of this element of I can walk and it feels fine to an extent for a while, but then if I if I go for too long, then it now is like I almost feel like I can't stand up much the following day.
Right.
Standing, I can stand probably for like 30 minutes, but then beyond that, and even within that, it's not comfortable, but beyond that, it's like, okay, I'm really pushing through to continue standing and not lean against something or sit down or stuff like that. So even just a recent story of how it impacted Connor and I was we both love music.
Yeah.
And we have often, like, since dating and being married, we'll go to gigs and things like that. And previously, like the 2 times we went to gigs, we always were where kind of a balcony was. And so I would lean and on this balcony kind of thing to take some of my weight.
Yeah.
And I found like in the night, it wasn't comfortable. Like my knees would hurt, my back would hurt, but it was like bearable to the point where I wasn't like really negatively impacted. But recently we went to another gig with some friends, and it was standing the whole time, and we had to like stand to get in and then standing when you're there, and there was nothing around me other than people. And it sucked because I was like, it was like, I don't know if people listen to them. Half Alive was the band that we were going to see. They're awesome. Yeah. We love their music. Yeah. Like, and I was standing there, and it literally was like where I was trying to like, in breaks, like I would literally be like kneeling, leaning against Connor, like just trying all of these different things to make it
feel comfortable.
Yeah, like, less painful.
Yeah.
But it literally was where I was like standing there, and I was like, it was just this weird mixture where I was like, this is such a beautiful experience, and like being able to hear their music, and I want to watch them, like even with the dance things that they do. And I was like, but literally within it, I was like probably like 5 different times, like we're in this group with our friends, and I'm like crying, like literally tears streaming down my face, because I was like, my back and my knees kill, and I hate that this is like a reality.
Yeah.
And I think for me, that was the thing of like, even beyond it being the reality for myself, it's the fact that I'm trying to also like hide this from other people and have a good time, because like they are awesome and this should be a good time. But it's like, I know that if I like leave to go sit down somewhere, it's not just the thing that I'm missing out. Yeah. It's more the thing of like how that then also impacts like Connor or impacts my friends, where it's like, well, now is Connor not going to be able to enjoy like his favorite band because I'm like, hey, I need to leave and sit down. And so like I stood and I pushed through the pain for a really long time, but then it got towards the end and I genuinely was like, I actually just can't stand anymore.
Right.
And so I like went to the back, and like he came with me, and then I was like, no, Connor, you go back in and enjoy it. And I like sat on the stairs for like 20 minutes. I was just like, this is my life. This sucks.
Is there things?
Sorry. Please go.
Is there anything that you can do to help before you get to that point? Like I don't know much about this one is specific, like this chronic illness you have. But I'm very out of context in this context. But what are the things you're saying, like holding the jar, or but is there anything that you can do physically, or is there any, I don't know, that can help you before you get to that point? Or is it more something that you need to be aware and mentally prepared for?
I think that's like the thing. So that's the thing that even now it's like, I was diagnosed when I was 20. I'm 26. It took me quite a while to really understand more of what it was impacting even. And obviously the older you get, the less good normally your body becomes in some areas. So I think for me, it's like that very much is the journey that I have continually been walking through with like having EDS. Because the weird thing is EDS, a lot of people have it. Like, I think it's in women. I don't remember exactly how many, but it's maybe even like 1 in 8 women or something like that could have EDS. But it's like some people can have it and it can just be very kind of minor. It's not the kind of constant pain element, and it's just they're more flexible, you know. There are certain things where it's so I have friends who have it and it's really not much of a problem. I don't know why. I don't even know if there's other underlying health issues that I haven't discovered yet that could impact it. But I think for me, like the advice typically, like when I was with the rheumatologist, essentially was this thing of you can the best thing you can do is kind of like have like a healthy lifestyle of like some activity. So particularly cycling and swimming and things that don't have high impact or kind of like your weight is carried by something else are the things that they advise to keep up. But they said essentially it's never going to like make it less than it is. It's just to kind of like help keep you active, because obviously if you gain weight, then that impacts it even more because so as far as I'm aware, there's not loads that you can do to kind of like remove it. And that for me is always the tension of like, then with it, where do you push past and push through pain and just kind of like deal with it? Or where do you actually pull back and kind of have that moment of, okay. And even for us now with gigs is like, there is this element of Connor recently was like, oh, there's this gig coming and they have seating, like maybe we should go. Like,
and so you're always having to think about like when whatever activities come, you're always having to think ahead. Okay, will there be seating? Will I be able to, you know, because when you have, I think these kind of pains, I mean, I don't know, I don't have chronic pains, but I have other issues that I always constantly have to think ahead. I'm like, okay, is my body going to make it through this and all that kind of stuff. And so I'm sure, you know, you have that, and all you two ladies also, like Beth, you, what is the chronic pain you have? I don't even want to try to do it, butcher it. I'm learning so much from, you know, I feel like today I'm learning a lot. So I would just like to, Beth, like talking about learning, I want to hear about your chronic pain.
Yeah, I have a irritable bowel disease called ulcerative colitis, or my particular one is called proctitis. It basically means that my colon gets filled with ulcers and gets really inflamed. So that
sounds so painful. Oh my gosh.
So ulcerative colitis is one of these diseases that you have flare-ups and you have remissions. So when I'm good, I'm fine. It's like no difference. It's okay. When I'm going into a flare-up, and I'm in a small flare-up right now, it's not got to the end of it. So like right now, some of it would be just like you have kind of like fatigue and you have kind of like some pains. You need to go to the bathroom more often, and there's certain foods that irritate it. But when it gets really bad, like in the last really bad flare-up that I had, it's like the hard bit is that you literally are like, you lose a lot of blood because you're bleeding a lot. Anything that you eat can just put you in pain, like even to the point where if I'm eating literally anything, I'm in pain and I have to go straight away to the bathroom.
So for you to avoid for it to get worse, you need is you caring for yourself, if you take care of yourself, you know, you don't get to that point.
So I mean, when I went to the doctors about it, they gave medication, which is an anti-inflammatory medication because it's a inflammatory problem. But they didn't really tell me anything else other than take these things. So I did a lot of research myself, and I found that a lot of what people were saying is that diet plays a massive part in it, because there's certain foods that trigger it worse. So when I'm in a flare-up, I'm having something with high fiber, it hurts more. If I have something like soup, it doesn't hurt as much. And so to stay away from having a flare-up, or to stay away from having the pain, I cut out, like right now I'm having to cut out dairy, gluten, refined sugar, acidic foods, raw vegetables, like all these different things. And so it can be quite isolating at times, because when you're basically like, okay, to avoid pain, I have to like just cut out so many things.
So to be at your healthiest, you have to cut all those things. So.
I have to cut out so many things. And I have to reduce my stress massively, because stress is a massive trigger of it as well. So when I'm stressed, it's a lot worse.
So how do you, because right now, we mentioned this earlier, you're staffing discipleship training school. So that comes with a lot of stress, you know, it's heavy, it's full on. So how are you kind of controlling that so you know, level out your...
Working in team is a massive blessing. Having people around you that understand and support you. I can't like express enough how good my team is. Like I would get emotional. We're getting vulnerable.
It's okay.
It's okay. You can get
real.
Yeah. I think that one, it helps as well, because my husband he's on the team with me, and he's really supportive of it. So he takes a lot for me. But my team is really good. I I think they gave a lot of like, I think this is something that's really helpful is when you're struggling with like a chronic illness where people don't see it a lot.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest things is maybe feeling not seen or like people don't like, you're like, oh, I need to rest. And I think Naomi, you probably struggle with this a lot. I was like, I need to rest and I need to step back. But people, you're always constantly thinking like, people probably think I'm lazy or that I don't want to take part. But a team that says, we see you, we see your needs, we want to cover you in everything. And how can we help you? And so they're constantly asking me questions. What do you need? And catering everything around what I'm capable of. Yeah. So you guys are all aware, for those who don't know, with Discipleship Training School, we go on like a 2-month maybe mission trip to a nation.
Yeah.
And actually I've done this 2 times before. On my one, we were backpacking in the Himalayas and I got diagnosed just before we went.
Oh, wow.
And so I was like, I'm going to go trekking in the mountains of the Himalayas. And I don't know what I can and can't eat. I don't know what, like, I'm going to be able to help. Because when I have the fatigue, it's so bad. Like, I can't get out of bed. Like, and you can't eat that much, so you haven't got things. So that was like, I got through it. I didn't really, I had the pain, but it wasn't so bad.
Yeah.
The second time we were in Albania, and that was really rough, like a really hard time. And from the end of that, I was hospitalized because my body couldn't take any food or even water. So I was like
dehydrated.
I was clinically dehydrated and I couldn't take anything in, and I was at a very high temperature. And so then this one, my fear is like, okay, gosh, like I'm meant to be now taking a team to the Middle East and leading them.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is very scary because I'm like, I don't know what I can and can't eat. Like in this nation that I've never been to, like how physically demanding it's going to be, what the stress levels are going to be like, because DTS is a very stressful environment. But honestly, I think I'm just relying on my team.
Yeah.
I'm really relying on my team. And they're so like, you can do what you want to do, what you feel you're capable of doing. You know, if you need to do some and not others, if you want to go and just go as like a person there and not lead, that's okay too. And so really, I'm so grateful for working in teams.
It's so important, like hearing you, it's so important to have a good support system.
It's so true.
You know,
absolutely.
And I think like, and isn't it sad that the lies that we can hear, like it's like, oh, like I have to lay down because like, you know, but I don't want people to, you know, think I'm lazy. And it's so sad. But when you have that support system, like they want, you know, to take you taking care of your well-being and all those kind of things. And I'm so happy that you do have an amazing team. We all know them and they're very supportive.
They're
and I'm
really
so
good.
glad.
Yeah, it's true.
You have to look after yourself.
And I think as well, I think you'll probably all relate knowing the kind of woman that you all are. I'm a very strong, independent woman. I don't like help. I like to do things by myself. I like to be independent. I'm high responsibility. Yeah. So having to lay down and listen when somebody tells me I need to rest and submit to that and to take care of my body and not do what I want to do all the time, that is really difficult. And so having people that you trust and asking them, like I had to ask my team, I give you permission to come to me and tell me or ask me, do you need to rest right now? And to challenge me when you see me doing something that isn't good for my body. So if you see me going to eat something which I shouldn't eat, I want you to challenge me.
Exactly.
I want that, which is it's really hard to ask for because I have to get over my pride.
And the thing is,
so hard.
I think the number one thing, and I totally get with the whole independency, like I'm very much like, I feel like a bother to ask for help, or, you know, I'm like, I got it, you know.
Absolutely.
And sometimes we don't got it. That's why we're, you know, created for relationships and all that kind of stuff. True. But I think one of the things for you to be at your best for your, you know, for the young people that you're discipling, you have to look after yourself. And I think that's where I always go back to, you know, like if I want to be at my best to show up for, you know, these young people, I got to take care of me, you know, which is not always, it's easier said than done.
And I think even as you're sharing, that for me was a huge part of my journey, even where we talked about the mental health side of things, but where my kind of like as the chronic pain kind of came in much more and increased. And I always had pain when I was younger, but it was things where it's like, as a kid, I thought it was growing pains. I thought I was like, I would find it hard to sleep because my legs hurt. And I thought it was like, oh, it's because I'm getting taller. Like, and then like, and then otherwise I remember it was a thing of thinking that everyone else just felt the very same way that I did. And so it was like, oh, well, whenever anyone does this, they're feeling that same pain. And even particularly going to like the gym and stuff with the language of, no pain, no gain was like, for me, I like, even as a teenager, we'd go to the gym and I could barely do lunges. I found it so painful to do lunges. And I saw everyone around me doing them. And my assumption, because I didn't know that I had anything about me that was different from anyone else, was everyone else feels the very same thing that I'm doing. I just don't have the willpower to like push through. And so then I'm weak, you know? Yeah. And I think something that like it was like a rude awakening as when I hit 20 and when I was diagnosed, was suddenly like in my teen years, like I was very like, very independent, very like strong personality, very kind of like confident, like whatever, I can just learn how to do it and do it well and like gonna be super effective and efficient. And I think for me, when I turned 20 and I had this diagnosis and I suddenly realized, oh, I'm not functioning like in the same way. Like I don't feel, and obviously none of us have the same experiences totally, but I suddenly like became so aware of like my weakness, you know? And I think it was this like wake up to me suddenly to realize like, wow, I'm actually like not like just indestructible, you know, I'm not able to do necessarily everything that I want to do the way that I can. Well, not that I can, that I want to. It's like I actually have limits. Like, and there's a ceiling of what I can do and how I can be. And so I think that's something in particular when you're a really motivated and a really driven person, having to, it's actually in some ways I think for me has been a really good lesson of realizing like the limitations in some ways that we have to work with. And having to kind of like lower that standard some. But I think also there is that other element of realizing kind of the empathy then that grows of your understanding then for what others. You kind of are dealing with helps you kind of understand and empathize with other people as you hear from them. Like before I realized I had this, I didn't have the language or even the mindset to be able to know how to ask people questions about things like chronic pain, you know? And I think now it's like, the more I've lived through stuff and realized the everyday tensions of having to kind of make things work. It's like now it's like, oh, I want to understand what other people are going through and I want to support people better than I would have before.
And I also think it just, I'm always shouting about the power of vulnerability and how being vulnerable is such a good thing. And it's only in this last year that I've learned that being vulnerable goes for your physical needs as well. Being vulnerable means to be weak, to be open to being hurt. And we learn that the things to come, like that when we are vulnerable, it gives, like God is strong. In our weakness, God is strong. And like allowing God to be strong in your own life when you've got this vulnerability it's really challenging, but it's such a release and it's such a relief. And also the same things go for like being vulnerable. The easiest thing that's going to come and try in is shame. You're going to want to try and keep it yourself, especially when it's isolating you and you feel like I'm the only one who's going through this and nobody understands. But actually sharing about it and talking about it, as you see, I'm getting emotional. It releases things, and it's having other people hear you and see you, and empathy being the most powerful
thing. And that you're not alone in this.
You're not alone. And having someone, being able to empathize and hear somebody and listen to them. And it just is such a safe spot for that vulnerability to then connection to be growing as well.
Man, I'm learning a lot. Because like, I mean, you know, you hear like friends and family, like I said, like they have chronic, you know, illnesses, but, you know, just hearing from you too. And like Leiji, I want to hear from, because you also have or no?
No, I don't really have.
Oh no, you were
Hallelujah.
That's how Hallelujah. I don't want to put that on your I'm so sorry.
No, what we were talking about is PCOS, but it's like a totally different kind of topic. But for me as well, like this is an area that I have no much knowledge. And I didn't know about you girls. Like honestly, you're such a strong woman, and like knowing that you going through this doesn't make me look to you like less or making me think you're less strong or less than I'm getting emotional.
We'll cry. It's okay, we can all be a mess together.
But it just makes me look at you, like it makes me look at you as even stronger. And it's amazing, like what you guys are going through and how the way you see it and the way you're acting on it as well. And like what you're Beth, you're saying about having such an amazing team makes me also think about all the women that is going through those difficulties, learning about a new thing that, like, I don't know, maybe being diagnosed, how important it is to have support and how important it is to be walking with people that will help you go through it. I think it's so important to not go through it by yourself.
Absolutely.
If you don't have, I don't know, maybe you don't have family or friends that you can really talk, maybe someone in the health
care
circle,
system,
in the care system, you know, really find people to talk about this. I have a friend that she has another kind of chronic illness, but she was telling me that has a Facebook groups that you can join, that you can share about like how you're feeling, also hear from other people what they do to overcome some of the difficulties. I'm so happy that we are having this time to share about this, because honestly, I don't think I've heard enough about it.
Me too. It's very good things that you just said, because I think, like I said, I'm like hearing both of you guys, like just hearing, and I was just like, wow, like I'm hearing from both of you, but can you imagine how many, like millions are like, you know, struggling in silence also, you know? And I think mental illness is something we don't discuss even within the church often, or like, you know, and I think it's something that is just so evident, you know?
Yeah. And I think even there's stuff that it's like, I've learned from it in terms of like, even you talk about in the church where it's like, within many Christian circles, there would be a concept or an understanding even of sometimes miraculous healings, you know, or praying for freedom and praying for breakthrough in health issues, you know, sometimes mental health, sometimes physical. And I think that's something that for me, like my personal stance on that is very much this thing of like, I 100% believe that people can like pray and ask God for healing, and they can receive healing. And like, but at the same time, and we see that in the Bible, all these stories of people being healed when Jesus prayed for them. But at the same time, there's also this element of sometimes people aren't healed. You know, and throughout my life, like I've grown up in a Christian environment my whole life. I've had people who've believed that my whole life. And I, particularly ever since I was diagnosed, like people will pray for me. And for me, I'm kind of in this position where it's like every time someone offers to pray for me, I don't want to turn them away, because I fully believe that could be the moment that God heals me miraculously. But at the same time, I also think there's this other side, which is like, he also might not, you know?
Amen. Yeah.
And I think for me, there's some things that I've really learned in this, like I said, of like, I had never been aware of like my like weakness and my need, like more than probably when I was like kind of really realizing kind of some of these physical things that I was like dealing with. And I just like what you were saying, Beth, is like for me, even that verse was such a strong one for me. Absolutely. Of like, God's power is made perfect in my weakness.
Absolutely.
And it's like, it's not in the areas that I'm strong. It's not in the areas where people are like, wow, she's epic at that, you know, but it's like, it's actually like his promise is that his power is made perfect in my weakness. And so I think even just for me in that is like, I'm like, Lord, like, and it's sometimes just a sense of even like, when people see that I'm struggling, it's like kind of a vulnerable thing where it's like, wow, my weakness is very much on display right now. Now people know I struggle, or I can't do things that other people can do, or whatever, or it comes at a cost. But I like just was pulled into this thing recently where I was like, God, like, even just in that, of like, Jesus totally made himself vulnerable, and his weakness was, God coming to man was totally put on display, you know, in this picture of the cross. And I think there's something then for me, which is like, even in the way that I see where it's Jesus asked God to take that cup from him, but he didn't take it, is like, I have this thing where I'm like, God, like, I will ask you to take this from me, but even if you don't, like, I believe that you will use this then to like, for the good of others and like for the good of myself, to teach me things and to teach others things, and also to bring you glory.
So good, Naomi.
And so I think that's just something that is like, it's hard, but honestly, that is like my hope. Like that's like the strength in it, you know, like that is my hope, and that's my strength in having something that is like, the likelihood is throughout my life, this will become worse and worse and worse. And even just like, you know, the fears of like, I'm 26 now and I can't like sit on a bench without a back, without having pain. What is it going to be like when I'm 50 or 60, you know? But I think that for me is like my like greatest strength and hope is like, one, this thing of like that God's power will be made perfect in our weakness and the beauty in that mixture. Yeah. But then also I think the second thing of that we were like what we were saying about death in the last episode is that we were never designed for this. Yeah. And that actually there is like the promise of like a life without it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Wow. Woo, yeah, girl, preach. No, it's so good. And I think from even like the last episode, like I mentioned about my anxiety, you know, it's not chronic pain, like, but I was at my darkest time when I just felt like nobody understands. No, like nobody's going to get this. But I just had this like this soft nudge, like God saying, I understand. Yeah. And I just remember what got me through those dark times is reading scriptures over myself over and over and over again. And one of the stories that always stick with me is like when I just started going through my panic attacks and I would stay up, like just couldn't sleep for like days, weeks, months. Yeah. And one of my older brother, I hope I don't, it's okay if I get cry, it's fine. He like sat with me. My mom had taken turns staying up with me, praying with me, reading the Bible with me. And I remember he's like, Mom, you know, you go sleep. I will stay up with Sion. And I remember he sat at the bed with me and he's just like, Sion, what's going on? I'm like, I'm going to die. I don't want to go to sleep. And then he goes, why do you think you're going to die? I'm like, I don't know. I'm just like, my heart keeps stopping. It's like, your heart, it's not stopping, Sion. And like, when I say these things, it sounds funny, but it's just like, it was real. And he's just like, you know, Sion, you're going to come to my wedding. You're going to meet my kids. I'm like, probably not. You know, like I would say, he's like, you will. And I just remember thinking, he's just like, Sion, like, he's just like, no, you were made to, you know, there's so many great things coming ahead for you. Like, you're not going to die. And I just remember thinking that night, I was just like, man, just to have that support, like when we were talking about support. And I was just like, in that moment, yeah. And then, I mean, at that time I didn't know, but when I look back, I'm like, that's God's heart for us, you know? Like, he's just like, this is not, you know, it hurts him to see me, you know, staying up all night, you know, worrying and all these kind of things and like feeling all alone, you know? And he's like, that's not his heart. His heart is for us to live this beautiful life, you know? And so I just constantly just reading those verses over myself of like peace. And I'm like, I'm not alone. I'm not alone. He's with me. Even though right now I feel so alone in this, you know, darkness of like anxiety, I'm not alone, you know? And I think that's what the enemy wanted to constantly feed into me. So
how was it for you too when you found out? Because I have friends that they mentioned to me that they questioned God why they had to go through that. You know, and this one friend in a specific, he said like, I was so mad at God. And I just came to him and like, why do I have to go through this? And he said it was almost a feeling that I was mad at him. I was mad at God because of that. And it was a process for me to actually go away from that feeling and understand what I was going through and everything. So how was it for you?
Yeah. When I got diagnosed, I didn't really know what it meant. So nothing. Through the process, honestly, if I'm being completely honest, which I will be. Please. I don't get mad at God. I get mad at myself a lot. And this is, gosh, we're going to be all tears today. It's something that I struggle with a lot is this like, because I'm high responsibility, is this self-hatred. Yeah. And it's not so in your face when I feel like self-hatred towards things. But for me, when it comes to the colitis, it's like, I've learned and I'm always like I will fix it kind of person. For me, there is no such thing as an incurable disease. I'm like, there will be a way. I will fix this because that's who I am. Yeah. And so learning of so many things that can help me and being in remission so many times. Like I dealt with one experience where I really thought I had experienced healing and then and then it came back and I was so flipping disappointed. But more than that, I wasn't annoyed at God. I was so angry at myself because I was like, I know the things that help me and I know the things that hurt me. And it's my fault. I've eaten these things that I shouldn't have. I've not looked after myself properly. It's all my fault. Yeah. And honestly, I still deal with that. Yeah. Just this time when I've come into flare up now, I just got so mad at myself because I was like, I've done this to myself. And I get annoyed because it seems unfair because I'm like, all I did was eat normal things. Like I'm not binging. I'm not a super unhealthy person. Like all I'm doing is eating a little bit of gluten, a little bit of milk, a little bit of this.
Just want to enjoy life.
I'm just stressed. Like I just want to, because honestly, food is such like, it sounds silly, but until you experience it, like when you have to separate yourself around people that are eating, That's really hard. Because if you think about eating around a dinner table, like that brings so many people together, especially when you're with so many different cultures where food is like a massive thing. Like I'm working with so many Brazilians right now and all they want to do is cook me food, and all I have to say is I'm sorry, I can't eat that. Especially when you're in missions and you're going to someone's house, it's such a tension.
And then you're about to go on to a different nation, like for outreach and stuff.
And so it's a constant feeling for me of, I don't get mad at God. I get mad at myself, and I'm working through that right now. Still, I'm still learning how to get through that. With God, I'm like, I know this isn't God's fault. God did not give me this disease.
No, for sure.
This is the world. This is what happens. God is good through it all, and I will continue to praise God through the hardest times of my life. And
so good.
And I have, and I hope that's how I will always be.
That's so beautiful.
What about you, Naomi?
Yeah. No, honestly, I'm very similar. Like, I don't think I've ever had it where it's, and I don't know why, whether that's personality or just, I don't know. But I think I've never had it where it was like, oh, I blame God for this, or I'm angry at God for this. I think it's more just, a thing of, I think it for me, even because there's nothing that I could really have done to not have it. Like it's not like something that you get, you're just born with it or you're not born with it, you know? And so I think for me, it's more just the thing of like the grieving, like where I don't, and I definitely think I hold myself sometimes to too high a standard, you know, where I'm kind of tried to push through where I probably shouldn't have, and have not communicated with team or with things as much as I should have, you know. But I think it's, for me, much more plays out just in the grieving. And I think, honestly, again, just the awareness of what we are living in is not like God's best.
Yeah,
like, it is not the original like design at this stage. You know what I mean? And so on one hand, that's that, and this is where I'm so often in that tension, even within the mental health. On one hand, I'm in this thing of like, wow, I'm grieving that there is suffering, and I'm grieving that there's pain, and I'm grieving like the complications that oftentimes it goes towards, like, my heart goes towards other people in that, where I'm like, wow, I have this, but honestly, in the grand scheme of other things that people have, like, theirs are way worse, you know? And I'm kind of, I see now like the extent, like, and I don't experience that myself, but I can only imagine then how much more they're having to deal with things like that I am with this kind of smaller issue that I have. But I think also then it kind of takes me to this place again of just this like really strong sense of like that there is like, we were made for goodness, and like that we were made for wholeness.
Absolutely.
And I'm like, this to me is kind of the like the reminder of actually like what, I don't know, the opposite thing, you know, like of actually what we were made for. Like, it's like, this is not what we were made for, you know? And so I think, again, there's just this thing of like wanting to bring kind of like hope, wanting to bring like safety, and wanting to create spaces for people to work through those like disappointments and some of those things that they do grieve in life where it isn't as it should have been. Yeah. But also, again, like for me, that drive of like, there are the good things and the beautiful things within this world that point towards what I was created for. Yeah. And so, it's never gone towards that. But
and I think for myself, you both touched on this, is like, even like when I was going through my anxiety, like people's like, are you mad at God? I'm like, no. I'm like, I think there's time when I was mad at maybe some situations that created that anxiety, I think. But I was just like, no, he's the reason that's getting me through this.
Yeah,
you know?
Exactly. How can I be mad at God?
He's giving me this peace, and, you know, and just keep pushing through. And and I just want to say thank you guys so much. And I think let us continue to learn more. And I've like today, just hearing you both, I've learned so much about, you know, I mean, there's so much more about chronic pain. There's different types of chronic pains, but just hearing both of you guys today, and I'm just like, wow, I need to be more aware and just want to learn more and ask more questions, you know? And I think that's how we can learn. So I just want to say, for those that are tuning in, like, if you are going through chronic pain, you know, and you feel alone, just send us a message. Like, as you heard, like, you know, we have people that do have, you know, chronic pains that will talk to you and listen to you. And and I just want to say that this was such an important time just to listen. And I just want us to continue asking each other questions and supporting one another. Yeah. So thank you, ladies, and
thank you
for your vulnerability, and thank you for sharing. It was such a amazing moment.